How you doing?
I'm doing. Always. I saw you and I saw my baby. Of course, I'm doing good. Um, I wanted to tell you when looking at all her animals, I had Bunny look up and we found a skunk, a stuffed skunk.
Oh,
Because I was telling you, we have six babies. We have cute little things. When they're small, they're very cute. So
hmm.
around June 2nd, she's getting a stuffed skunk, not a stuffed real skunk, a stuffed fake skunk.
Okay. Around
Okay.
June 2nd. Okay.
Okay, so
Awesome.
a package will come for her.
Okay, terrific. She loves her toys, man. She's got hundreds of them already. And if we try to put one of them away in the closet, she freaks out, even if she never plays with it.
Um, we brought down one box of photographs from upstairs. That's where I found the Rose Parade float of Frank Sinatra.
That was cool.
Yes, that was. I was so glad we had it and I found it. We have another box. If it's still in there. Now I was married at the time, and I had a picture that I sent to your grandpa when he was in the army before I went to live in New Jersey, which is a subject we were going to talk about. And I guess I had your great grandpa snap the picture of me sitting on the bed with all my stuffed animals. So I had a lot of them, and I called my skunk Flower.
Okay. Like from
Okay,
Bambi.
so a couple of things I left out way at the beginning. The town that Gottlieb Weisman, my grandpa, came from in Switzerland is St. Gallen's, Galens, if you ever want to Google it. And I don't have it down here now. Bridget's family were the Hennessy's and Kilcoynes, and they were from Sligo or Athenry. And there's a famous Irish like folk song about the fields of Athenry. Very famous,
Oh, yeah.
beautiful song that people cry over. Um, but I was thinking what we were going to talk about. I didn't tell you about. I told you about how your grandpa had his enlistment moved up to be with all his friends, and then one thing and another, they all got separated anyhow. So when he came out of basic and he didn't want to go to officers candidate school, they didn't know where to send him or what to do with him. So they kept him around. I think basic training was 8 weeks. And we didn't go to visit him, I think, for 4 weeks. They couldn't have visitors. And then you could go on and spend a Sunday afternoon. So when his group got finished basic and got sent away, they kept him on there as a cadre, which was like he would help the drill sergeants and stuff like that. And they found that they had to do something with him. So they sent him to Fort Devens in Massachusetts, which I think was about, it's still there, of course, about 30 miles west of Boston. It's right on a major freeway, turnpike, whatever they called him back there. And he was assigned to the 29th. Oh, no, before that, after he finished basic, he called me up one day and he says, I found an apartment. I want you to come to Trenton. Trenton is the closest city to Fort Dix and the big Air Force Base, which is still there. And I'll think about it, the name of it. We had this teensy tiny apartment. It was a kitchen with a stove and a sink and a table, real tiny, a bathroom, real tiny up to one side, and a bedroom off the kitchen, really small. It was in Trenton. And he got an allowance towards that we used to pay the rent from the Army. So he didn't live on base and he lived there. And then he got stationed in Fort Devens, and I think it was like in January. It's cold. No, January is when he got out. Anyhow, it was cold. So we loaded up the car with everything we could think of, and we drove up there. I don't remember how long it was, but it was probably 12 hours or something. And he reported, and he was stationed with the 29th Evac Hospital, which had just been rotated back because they were sort of closing down the bases and everything in Korea at that time. And they didn't know what to do with him there either, so they put him in supply. And he says it was mostly goof off time, and he was very bored. But the day we got up there, and I was sitting out in the car, and they said to him, okay, you can have tomorrow off because you got to go find a place to live. So we went and we found a nice couple who had turned their house into mini apartments. And there were 2 other couples there. The one upstairs had twin girls, and the one downstairs from us, she was pregnant, she had a baby boy while we were living, and we had the other. We had a living room with a trundle couch. The couch just unfolded into like a sofa bed, and a kitchen with a table and bathroom. They were all small things. The people's name was Ham, and they were very nice. So we stayed there for a while, and I don't remember why we moved, but we rented this little cabin in the woods. It was just us and the landlords next door. And this had a kitchen, no living room, and a bedroom. And the shower was in the bathroom. So if you wanted to sit down and take a shower, you could sit down and take a shower.
Okay.
And that's where it was cold. So we were there until, I guess, January. And then they were still trying to get rid of people. And they said, if you had entrance to college or university, you could get out early to be there for when the term started. And he was accepted to NYU, but he didn't go there. He went to, oh shoot, I knew what this is, and I'll think about it, which was a college, but I think it's a university now, and he took up accounting. So he got out of the Army. Instead of 2 years, it was more like 22 months, something like that. In Massachusetts, along the freeway, they had tall poles, and they marked each year how high the snow was. You would drive down there in the wintertime, and it would be like being in a white tunnel with no roof. It was very close.
Wow.
We went to, I took the bus into Boston to look for a job, and I couldn't find anything. I had never been there before. I didn't know the metro system, buses, or anything. And I wandered around all day, and I was glad I was able to find my way back to the bus to get back home that night. But I never worked all the time. He was in the Army. I didn't go back to work till he got out. And then I went to, and I worked at Merrill Lynch at their main office down on Wall Street. And it was at the time where they got their first computer. It took up the whole second floor.
Wow.
And you couldn't open the door because it was climate controlled. And every now and then somebody would open the door and people would start screaming.
I bet our phones are more powerful than that computer now.
Yeah, it's true. And like I said, it was huge. They had a glass door so you could look in and see. But it was very interesting working for Merrill Lynch. I was in the wire and order room, and we had people, the orders would come in and they would call the broker on the floor. So you had to be really quick because prices went up and prices went down. And a big deal was 1 million shares when they like practically had to stop trading when it reached 1 million shares compared to now. And I stayed there until I got pregnant with JR. And she was due in October, but they made me leave at the end of June. I don't know whether they thought a teletype machine was going to fall on me or something, but they didn't want you working any longer than that. So when he came out, he didn't go into accounting. He took Pace. It was Pace College, and it's now Pace University. I knew it was in there.
Okay.
And he tried several jobs, and he was selling insurance, but he didn't like going out and going to people's homes. And he just got some of the family to sign up for auto insurance. And then he was selling it. Did I tell you about Encyclopedia Britannica?
Yes.
Yeah. We didn't have malls exactly the way we are now, but there was more small malls, and they would advertise. They'd have a couple of guys standing there saying, just sign up, we're giving away a whole set, you know. Then you had to call them afterwards and say, I'm sorry you didn't win, but we can give you a deal. And I had to be the one that did the cold calls, and I hated it.
Oh, yeah. That's the worst.
Yeah. And then we decided to buy our deli, which was across the street from our beautiful old Victorian house that had been turned into a two-family house. And we stayed there. And Tony and I were born while we owned it, and Glenn and Guy were born while we owned it. And then we moved to California. Well, the last time when we mentioned it, you said, why did we move out there? We had come to California once before. We made the trip across the country to Redding to visit your great grandpa Scalise, Calgaro. And then we moved out here. Now, another thing I remembered, different subject. We're talking about live performances we saw.
Yeah.
When Grandma turned 75, we planned a big surprise party for her. And Aunt Josephine and Aunt Anna came out, and Fifi. Now, Fifi wasn't a relative. She was best friend. Everybody called her Aunt. Her name was Bazanti, and she had two boys, Anthony, and then later on in years, she had Nicholas. And Anthony was Uncle Al's age. They were friends. They grew up together. And he became a lawyer and stayed on Staten Island. So they came out, but they stayed with Aunt Lucy. So Grandma wouldn't know that they were there, figure out that she was getting a party. Well, it just happens. And you're going to have to ask JR and Tammy this story, because they tell it better than I do. We had a minor earthquake.
Oh.
While they were sleeping. And so the girls were running back and forth to see if Aunt Lucy was all right. I believe her chimney collapsed, but they were okay. So we had the party, and we had the party at Lawrence Welk's resort, which was south of here. And I'd have to look that up to see if it's still there or whether or not. And so Grandma was really surprised. And son of a gun, what would happen? There was a electricity blackout, but they managed to get it done so they could serve dinner. We had, I remember, was it a sit-down dinner or a buffet first? I know we had chicken and dumplings. I don't know what else they had. And then they had the Lawrence Welk show and the dancers and the singers, his whole ensemble, everybody that was there. And it turned out there was an actress who was on early TV. Her name was Gail Storm. And she just happened to be in the audience that night, and I met her in the ladies' room.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, it was cool. And but Grandma like had the time of her life. She, you know, I don't know if you knew, she was never missed the Lawrence Welk show.
Oh, I didn't know
that. She really liked it. And we have a lot of pictures and of Grandma and all the kids, and I'm sure Bunny probably has one on her phone she could show you. And so those are the things that I had been thinking about over this past week,
Mhm.
and trying to fill in as more things come. The Hennessy's that make the brandy and drinks were a branch, a different, a distant relation, or maybe not so distant, I don't know, to Bridget. And she said they were the small ones because I think they went to France. They left England, Ireland, but instead of coming to America, they immigrated to France.
Mm.
Okay. Now, was there anything else that you were thinking of that you,
Well,
I think that,
speaking of Bridget, I was looking at Aunt Becca's all the work she's done on ancestry.com with the timeline and everything, and it looked like Bridget passed away very young, like in her early 40s. Do you know
yes,
what happened there?
she did. She got very sick. You know, she lost two babies.
No.
Yeah. My mother was the oldest, and there was Patrick and Dennis. They were twins, and Dennis died. And then there was the other one, Albert. And they always refer to him as the baby, Albert. And I think he did, like he was one, and he, I think they said he died of the summer sickness. So I don't know what that was. I guess I could look it up. Yeah,
Mhm.
and then she got sick. And of course they went to every doctor they can think of. My mother says they were giving her porter. You know, porter is that dark ale,
Mhm.
and she hated it. It was very, I guess it was very strong tasting, but I think she just withered away and died. I don't
Oh,
know. Remember, I don't know if I have any more notes about it in my uh, tote bag that I have all these things. Um, but yes, she was pretty young.
yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things I noticed in the timeline that struck me as interesting. But I mean, I guess in those days, medical science wasn't what it is now. They just
Oh,
couldn't always figure out what was wrong with somebody.
yes, that's very true. And Gottlieb promised her that they were going to go back and bring the children back to meet the family, because she was very homesick too. But she had her sister here, and they had a lot of other relatives. But she wanted to go back home, and he promised her they were going to go back home, and they were planning and saving for it. And every time we used to listen to a station that played nothing but Irish music. I think it was on for an hour every day. There was two things my mother really liked. That one, and on Saturdays they broadcast the Metropolitan Opera, and
Mhm.
I'd go to the movies when I come home, and it would be on. Whenever they played "I'll Take You Home Again," Kathleen, my mother cried, because
Oh,
her mother was so looking forward to it, and they were so close to going, and she died before they could. Now, maybe it was with the last year, or surely before last year, there was an article about can people really die from a broken heart? And they said yes. And they listed case after case after case of somebody, a husband or a wife dying, and the spouse, who was in seemingly good health, and Gottlieb was like a bear. He was a big, robust man.
mhm.
He died about a year after she did. My mother says he just couldn't face being alone without her. He just missed her so much. And I always meant to write to the Department of Health in New York and get like his deaths, both of their death certificate, because it's supposed to list the cause of death,
Mhm.
and find out what it was. I had started doing all the genealogy when we were living in Provo, where I think we were there 6 months. So while your dad was at work and I was sitting, we had this little apartment, like bigger probably than where we lived in Massachusetts and the one in Trenton, New Jersey. And so I worked on it then. That's when I did some research. And I have a letter from one of my father's cousins in New York, because we were trying to figure out about Rosa and Luigi coming from Italy.
Mhm.
And I guess once we got home, I didn't have as much time on my hands, and I kind of just let it go, because I had always
Mm.
planned on doing that, to see what it was. But I just have the story my mother told, that her mother was very sick, and she tried and she just couldn't do work, and they had a housekeeper, and then she died, and then a year later my grandfather died.
Wow.
So I don't know what he died of, but
I don't know. I think you nailed it. I mean, it sounds like he definitely died of a broken heart.
it definitely sounded like it.
And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, and I definitely think that's real. I mean, you talk about like this was in the news not too long ago, when Carrie Fisher passed away and Debbie Reynolds died like 2 months later. That's like they were
Aunt
saying
Rena
the
and
same
Uncle
thing.
Bill.
Yeah.
Uncle Bill died, and I don't remember why exactly, whether Aunt Rena collapsed or whatever, and they put her in the hospital, and the doctor said to her, "How you doing? What's wrong?" And she said, "You're asking me how I'm doing. My husband died yesterday," and she
Mm.
died shortly after that too.
Wow.
I remember people named Wilson who lived next door to my sister Lucille, and it was multi-generation family too. I don't remember, was the husband's father and mother or the wife's father and mother lived with them. And I think the husband died. The wife woke up in bed. The husband had called her, and he died right then and there. And she called out for her daughter or daughter-in-law. And when the daughter and daughter-in-law came in, the mother was dead too. So
Wow.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
but yes, Debbie Reynolds and her daughter were very, very close, I understand.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, on a brighter note, my dad wanted me to ask about the chicken place that you ran with Grandpa. What do you remember about that?
Okay, yes. Okay, they were little because I think Tony now weren't in school yet. Okay, it was called the Cackle House, if I remember correctly. And it was a roasted chicken takeout. I think we maybe had 2 tables where somebody could come in and eat, but it was mostly take. Now, let me explain what a broaster is. A broaster is this great big vat. It's a pressure cooker, big, big. Took like, I don't know, 10 gallons of fat, cooking oil. It came solid and it melted in there, but it was also a pressure cooker. So roasting is deep frying under pressure. And it was delicious. It only took, I think, 8 minutes to cook. And it's sort of like these pots they have now that for home use, the little pressure cookers that they have now for home use. So we would put, oh, I don't know, whether it took 4 cut up chickens at a time into a basket, you lowered the basket, you closed it, you turned the wheel, set it, and it would let you know when it was done.
Mm.
And we would sell it by the piece. And then we had specials, like the whole chicken or 2 whole chickens or stuff like that. And we put potatoes in. And it had a special breading, seasoned breading coating that went on. It was very, very good.
Mm.
The only thing was we didn't have enough business to keep it up. When we first moved to California, we had sold the deli, and we bought a laundromat. And that was good for a while. You wouldn't believe it takes a lot of work. When people left at the end of the day, we had to go down and we had to wash inside and out of every machine and wipe the inside of the dryers. And sometimes people would leave clothes, and then we had to clean the windows from the steam and mop up the floor. And once a week we had to go and recharge the salt water apparatus. And the thing was, I think it was a quarter a load, or maybe 50 cents, but it was very cheap. We didn't charge for the dryers. There were people who washed their clothes at home and then come in and use our dryers. But we had this little hasp thing, and on it we could lock it and then make them pay. And they would say, oh, I'm going to call the police, whatever. And a couple of times they did, and there were signs up, and it said you had to, there's only for clothes that were washed there. And that also, people began buying more washers and dryers, and that business wasn't that great either, because we were sharing everything with grandma, grandpa, and uncle and us. And there were 7 of us, and it was really scraping the barrel, you know,
Right.
to get by. So we went, the first thing we did was the laundromat, and then we did the chicken place. And every night we'd ask the kids, what do you want? We gave them chicken every night. And Glenn and I each always used to say 2 wings every night. So what do we do? I think after that is when Grandpa went into the post office.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had the laundromat, we had the chicken place. The deli was in New York. I mean, we were always working.
Sure.
The deli in New York was pretty good, but I don't know, Grandpa had like itchy feet, and he wasn't sure. He had plans one time of buying a chicken farm in New Jersey. And I'm so glad he didn't, because Tony and Debbie do it more like a hobby. But I thought there was just going to be too much with all these kids that we had, and it's a lot of work. And we had the winters, though Tony and Becca get a lot of all kinds of weather where they live.
Right.
I think it just would have been too hard to do. When we first came out to California and we were buying the laundromat, we were looking at a motel. And I thought, okay, that's a lot of work too, because to make ends meet, we would have had to do all the work. You know, we couldn't hire somebody to do the cleaning and be behind the desk and the landscaping, everything else that went with it. So I was really glad that we didn't buy that. And I don't think we had quite enough money to put down on it anyhow. And there were a lot of motels in California when we came out. I guess there still are. I just don't think about them or see them now.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I got a question from Sharon. She said, let's see. Oh, this is her exact words. She says, Pam told me that you were collecting stories from your grandma about her life. The next time you talk to her, can you see if she remembers going over to my mom's house and getting her and her brother Jim and taking them to the park?
Brenda and Jim.
Yes.
Okay, I was about 8 when Jim was born, and I was like a natural made live-in babysitter. I was with those kids all the time. I would go over to Lucille's house and play with the kids so she could do her housework. It's not that she wanted me to come over and do any of the housework for her. And I loved being with her. I idolized. When I was little, people would say to me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would say, "I want to be Lucille."
Oh.
I didn't say I wanted to be a writer or anything, I wanted to be Lucille. But yes, I do. I took those kids everywhere. I guess I took them to like, if the city had a Christmas party for the kids,
Mhm.
I would take them there. If there was a parade, and I even have a picture of Denise. I took her to, it was Memorial Day or 4th of July, something like that. I took her there. When Brenda and Denise took ballet lessons, I took them there every Saturday, and went over to their house, took them down for their ballet lessons, sat there and waited, and then took them back home again. I spent a really, really lot of time. Their house had 3 stories. And while Lucille was playing, sometimes we would play hide and seek in the house. And I would read to them. I would babysit so they could go out on a Saturday night. I spent a lot of time with them.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
because
taking them to a park, I probably did.
yeah,
There was, excuse me,
oh, sorry.
one second. Okay. Before they moved into the house they owned, they rented a house in this Italian neighborhood called Rosebank. And I think that's where my grandma and grandpa had their house in Rosebank. A short distance from their house is the Garibaldi Memorial, because he lived on Staten Island for a while, and I think he was a candle maker before he went back to Italy. And they had this little house and shrine there. And there was a park that had a wading pool. So I would take the kids there, get them out of Lucille's house, let them play in the wading pool. And of course, I had to go in with them, and so they would play and they would cool off. And then then I would take them back home. Other than that, I'm trying to remember whether there was, I'm thinking of another park with swings and seesaws, and I don't exactly, I haven't thought about it in 75 years. I don't know how
Sure.
long. Time like that. But I'm pretty sure if there was a park, I took the kids to the park.
Well, because one thing that Sharon was asking was, she said that like Brenda was telling her that she didn't know how you would get to the house since it was quite a distance from where you lived. Do you
Oh,
remember?
I walked everywhere.
Really?
There were buses if it was raining to take, and they had free transfers. You would take a bus so far and get a transfer and take another bus and then walk to the closest bus stop to the house. But I walked. Yes, it was quite a distance. Someday, if you're down here, if I can find it, I'll show you the map of Staten Island, or we could pull one up on the screen and I will show you where I lived and where they lived.
Oh, yeah.
And you would see Staten Island is all hills, just everywhere. And I think that's how I got into shape in high school, was walking there and back. Another thing I want to do, when Patrick is done and he's graduated and he has a week or 2 off, whatever, I wanted to get out my yearbook. I wanted to show you my picture of me in high school when I played in the band. I played in the orchestra. And then we got one music teacher that wanted to start a band. Well, there weren't that many people in the orchestra as it was. So we couldn't have a marching band. But the people in the orchestra that he could cajole, talk them into doing it, we would play college songs and cheers. And we would sit in the stands during the football games and do whatever was appropriate. And the PTA got together and I said, there was only a handful of us. And they bought us sweaters and instead of uniforms, because we weren't marching, we didn't have a lot of people. But I want to share the picture of us
Oh, yeah.
in the yearbook.
Oh,
And I earned my letter
good.
in music.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the closest thing to a sport that I was ever interested in. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate
My
that.
my civics, I guess it was my civics teacher, the first day, and she says, okay, I want you to go down each row, starting with the first row, going back, and tell me your name. And I said, Julia Del Bagno. She says, no, it's Del Bagno. I had to go to 4 years with your brother trying to get them to do the same thing. So she had Aurora Messina, and her name was Aurora Messina. And she never called me anything. And she happened to be the music teacher. And when we had an assembly, there was always an assembly on Thursday for freshmen and juniors, and Friday for sophomores and seniors. And at that time, there was a benediction and there was a hymn. Nobody ever thought anything of it. This is Catholic, this is Protestant, this is an old Jewish hymn or something like that. And she played the organ. We had somebody who played the organ and piano, several people that played the piano in our orchestra, but she always played for the assemblies. And of course, the other classes were shortened on those days for the freshmen and the juniors, and then on Fridays and all that. But when you were in orchestra, you had to play both days. You went to both assemblies. But it was fun. I liked it. And I had the same kids in orchestra. We were all together and we all did English honors, and we had all our classes together. So it was our group. We were all on the school newspaper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yes. I was a reporter for the Curtis Log because Staten Island was a seaport town and the log was like the captain's log. So they picked log as the name for our newspaper.
That's cool.
But we had a wood log as our little model thing we had this little bitty narrow office and we couldn't get like more than 4 people in at a time. So you had to turn a story and you had a day. You couldn't just drop it every time. If your story was due on a Tuesday, you can only go in there on Tuesday because you didn't have a lot of people. I mean, a lot of room.
Yeah, like every school paper I've ever been a part of, they don't get the VIP treatment like the sports.
Right. Yes. Oh, sports were very, very big.
And
I guess they still are. But it was a beautiful school, and I'll show you the pictures of it. It's Gothic. It's high on a hill, and that's part of the school song was high on the hill, all other schools above. Yes, because we were the tallest school on Staten Island. And as you came from on the ferry boat from Manhattan, you could see it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, it was very cool. It's
I
a
think
beautiful school.
I think
Indoor swimming pool.
Ooh.
And boys and girls, excuse me, gyms were on different floors because the boys didn't wear bathing suits for swimming.
Oh, wow.
And they had to say, okay, everybody is out. And then the teacher would call down to the boys swim coach, and then let them go up, that all the girls were out and back in the shower room. There was rumors, I don't know how true it was, that underneath the auditorium was a shooting range. And they used to offer shooting. And they had a team, but there was an accident, somebody got hurt and they closed it. And every now and then somebody would think is to say, come on, let's go see, because from the back of the orchestra, we didn't have a pit that went up and down. We just sat on the floor in front of the stage. But if you went up to the stage and in the back, there was a shut off staircase, and we were always daring one another to go down there and see what was there. And I was a librarian for the orchestra, which means that I had to put out everybody's music on this stand in the right place and whatever we were doing that day. And then they were supposed to turn their music in when they went home. Lots of times they would leave it there, you know, fastest one out, and I would have to go and collect it and put it back in order and stuff like that. So my first year, my freshman year, I worked in the library. I volunteered. You got points for, you know, points for doing that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I
Did
was
you
never athletic, so I didn't join any. Gym was my worst class.
really? Oh, did you have the thing like It's a Wonderful Life where, you know, the dance floor opens up to a pool?
No, no, it was they called it as you came in the main front door, there was the hallway, and there was a sign that said natatorium.
Hmm.
And when you opened it up, there was this beautiful pool, deep at one end, shallower, you know, like down to 3 feet at the other end. And there was seats on either side. So if there was a swim meet, the visitors sat on this side and the home team sat on the other. It was really beautiful, and you could swim all year round. We had swimming all the time. The only bad thing was when we had wet hair, we hardly ever had enough time to dry it. They had these powerful big dryers. I swear they were this big, and you'd have 2 or 3 girls trying to get their hair dried at the same time. Now, on the top floor, there was the art department, and on one end, and you could take a shortcut across the roof to get to if you had art. And if you had wet hair in the wintertime, you froze. It was just bad. But it was so much shorter between the bells, you know, of the classes, rather than going, if you're on, say, the east side, you'd have to go down along the corridor, go back up to get to your next class. But it was one of those things. We had the ugliest gym clothes. We had these gym suits with bloomered bottoms. So picture elastic, and you pushed them out and they bloused out. They were ugly green. And I guess years later, they let the girls wear shorts and t-shirts.
Hmm.
The bathing suits were wool and itchy. They were horrible. We had no choice.
Yeah, I just finished reading a book about the Rat Pack. And, you know, they go through sort of the life story of each member one by one. And they talk about how Frank Sinatra got his start, and where it was really like the kind of like the start of World War II toward the end, when they said he was really the original teen idol, when the Bobby Soxers were all obsessed.
Yes.
And do you remember that at all? Were you caught up in Sinatra fever, or was that not for you?
Oh, yes. And there was a big deal about whether you were a Bing Crosby fan or a Frank Sinatra fan. Well, you could be both. But people didn't think about it that way. And then in the background was Perry Como, and then they came like Victor Moan, and then there was Edie somebody and her husband Steve somebody, and Edie somebody, whatever like that. But Frank Sinatra, oh yes, everybody wanted that. And we would dance to his records, you know, in the living room. And I didn't go. My mother wouldn't let me go see him. I was too young to go see him at
The Paramount?
The Paramount, yeah.
Yeah, that was where he, like, one of the places where he really broke out.
Oh, yes. I told you, went to see later on, Julius LaRosa was there. I had been there other times, but for the life of me, I cannot remember who I saw. So I guess they weren't that big of a star.
Who were some of your other favorite musicians growing up?
Well, I'll tell you, it happened one day. We kept the radio on all day long, and it
Mm.
was music one kind, one to the other. And I heard this record, and I think the first one I heard was "The Whole Wide World Is Waiting for the Sunset." It was Les Paul. I
Oh,
wasn't that I was in love with him. I was in love with his music. The way he played the guitar, I always thought of guitar as hillbilly country
right.
music. And his wife, um, our Adobe Hacienda. I can't even think of all their songs now. I did like most of the big bands, and I did like Perry Como because he did have his own show too on television, but that was a little later on. But I loved all that big band, all the big. I still do. The channel I had on when we first started talking played the big band, and
Absolutely.
Louis Prima and Ella Fitzgerald. They
Hmm.
were two of my favorite. Now I just thought Ella and I didn't even know that she was black. Because I had never seen a picture of her. We didn't have television back then. I just loved the sound of her voice. It was so like silky. I don't know how to describe it. Um, but I liked the Andrews Sisters and Peggy Lee, Patty Page. I think I still have records. I know I have records, LPs out in the shed. I don't know if they're playable anymore because they've been through heat and cold, the summer and
Oh, yeah.
the vinyl. It's probably no good. But we used to. I used to buy a lot of them. The big thing, one of the big things, and I guess we was still in high school, is we came back with the ads on television saying, oh, 12 songs for only $3.99, something like that. And you thought you were getting 12 records, but you weren't. They were all on one. It was the first time when they came out with those.
Oh,
And yeah. And then there were the ones with the big holes, and you had 33s, and you had to buy the adapter for your record player because they didn't fit on there. And this was this
oh,
little like whirligig plastic thing that you put in there, and then you fit it over this spindle. The big thing with us was the countdown on your hit parade when it went to television, and we would just sit around and actually we listened to it before it went on television, and we would get our pens and pads and write down, and they would do the number 10 song is this and that,
mhm.
and number one for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and they would put it on, and we used to bet, if there was going to be a new one or not. Another thing they had then was it wasn't sheet music. It was, oh, maybe pages, like a big page folded over, the lyrics to all the songs. And we used to even take them to school. So we'd eat our lunch and we'd go out in our playground was a cement court. It was all cement.
Mhm.
We didn't have grass or anything. And we used to just hang out there and share the music sheets. I forget what we even call them. And they would come in different colors, and they had ads, and we would learn all the words to all the new songs. I wish I had kept some of this old stuff. If I had, they'd
Yeah.
probably be flaking away into nothingness now.
Yeah. Did you always have a television growing up?
Oh no, not till way after World War II.
Mm,
Um, I don't even remember what year it was. And my mother and father says, look, we've done with that, or we'll wait till they come down. But if you went to Manhattan, the RCA building, the uh, ground floor was a showroom, and there would be, oh, maybe 12 TVs in the window, and you would always find people standing there watching them. So I don't remember when we first got it, but we weren't one of the first on the neighborhood. But when we got married, we were the first people we knew that had color television, because your grandpa
oh,
loved television.
mhm.
He just loved it.
Yeah, I know he was really big into sports.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
or did, do you remember, like, did he have a favorite sport? Was he more a football guy, more basketball?
Yes. In there was seasons back then.
Yeah.
They started out in the spring with spring training, and then you went through uh, baseball. Football would go into training, but by the time the World Series came, then the football season started, and there would be football in the daytime and basketball at nighttime. The New York team were the Knicks, and I remember going, and they played at 59th Street Armory. I think that was where it was before they went to Madison Square Garden. And I went there with my boyfriend at the time on his birthday to see a Knick game. That was the first one I saw in basketball. I didn't like it then. I didn't
Mhm.
even like it after, but I learned baseball. I learned how to keep score. I learned basketball. I learned football, but I never really was
Right.
into any of it.
Sure.
There was a team and there was a book written about them, and they might have even made a movie called The Boys of Summer, and it was about the Dodgers. That I kind of liked because I had to watch so much of it and I got to know them. Pee Wee Reese, uh, Gil Hodges was my favorite. I don't know why. Your grandpa's favorite was Duke Schneider. In fact, he tried to give Uncle Al the nickname of the Duke, but it just didn't take. Everybody always just called him Albie.
Hmm.
And Roy Campanella, Sal Magley, and then we got into Koufax and Drysdale as the pitchers. I don't remember all of them now, but we went to see them several times, and they were just like regular people. They parked their car on this empty lot that only the baseball players could go to. I don't know why, or maybe they were building them a parking lot or something like that. And they walked over to the stadium, and they went in one door, and you went in the others. And mostly, the only thing I saw was Dodger games. Every year, I guess it was the Dodgers and the Yankees played across town. They had crosstown rivalry, and they played a game, and we went to see that. Excuse me, one year. I took my nephew Jim for his birthday to Yankee Stadium, and we saw the Yankees. I didn't really care one way or the other. I was not a fan, so I wasn't a
Hmm.
fan of anybody. But I went along and we watched all the games at home. So whatever season it was, that's what we watched. I think Grandpa liked baseball the best, and then football. But I can't say because we watched every UCLA basketball game too,
Hmm.
and then whatever. Did I ever tell you the story about he was in Provo? So there was this big UCLA game coming on. It was a kind of championship thing. Now, we were in Provo, we were in Salt Lake City, wherever it was, TV reception was not good. It had to be relayed over the mountain. So the game came on, and we had this little TV in our motel suite apartment, and it had rabbit ears. So he wasn't getting a good reception. He said, go turn them this way. So as soon as I touched it, the picture came out. He says, okay, leave it. I walked away, and they've got the snow and no, it was like
Oh, no.
television static, stuff like that. I spent the whole game holding the
No.
antenna so that he could watch.
No.
He could watch that. There was something about me touching it, that vital electricity or whatever I had flowing
Mhm.
through me. Brought in the,
Wow.
I guess it was my hand to hand made the connection up through here, down the other shoulder, down the other thing to the
Oh,
other hand.
sure.
And he had that. And whatever it was, the only thing I remember was that somebody took this long shot from the other end of the court, and it went in, and everybody yelled and stuff. I dropped the antenna, and the picture went out, and I had to grab it back again. But I guess UCLA, whatever, won.
Wow.
It was
Oh,
it
man.
was funny. But
Yeah, I
I
mean,
I took my hands down during commercials.
oh,
You know.
well, that was
Yeah.
generous of him. I know the man loved his sports. I've heard stories about how if there were two games going on simultaneously, he would set up multiple TVs so he could watch
Yes,
them.
yes, indeed. Yeah.
Wow.
And when
Oh,
they came out with Monday Night Football, I hate to admit this, but I cursed, ruin all it. I said, you ruined my life for
oh
putting more,
no.
yes,
Sports
more TV with
every week.
what's his name? Howard Stern. What was that guy's name? There was a football player. Was it Frank Gifford? And this sports guy, with the other announcer. This
Oh, I don't know.
sportsman got into a lot of trouble with when a black football player, and I can't think who he is right now, grabbed the ball, intercepted a pass and started running down the field. And he said, look at that little monkey go.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
oh,
And
I
he
didn't
got a
know about
lot of
that.
trouble like that. And JR
Wow.
will know, she would probably remember
Hmm.
who it was. But we
Wow.
watched everything, bowl games and whatever, tournaments and whatever they were.
Yeah. Well, all right. I better get this dog on a walk so I can get to bed. But speaking of Grandpa, I would love to pick up next time if you can think of some of just your favorite stories about Grandpa, because he died when I was so young that I only have a few scattered memories of him.
Okay, I'll try and think of what come back, because to me that would be, to you that would be a story. To me it was like every day.
Right.
Yeah, well, so I told you one tonight about
Yeah,
a
no, and I love
basketball
it.
game. Yes, like
Yeah.
that. Okay. Um, Howard
Okay.
Cosell.
Oh, Howard Cosell.
Howard
Okay.
Cosell, Howard Stern. Tony. I think it was Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford. Yes,
Okay.
UCLA was his favorite college team, and he would watch anybody. And the Dodgers was his favorite baseball team. And I used to say I admired Gil Hodges a lot, and I used to needle him a little bit. But he didn't want me to have crushes on anybody or anything like, and I really didn't. But he and Pee Wee Reese, and you probably heard about Pee Wee Reese. This was a Southerner. Yet when Jackie Robinson made it onto the team, he just like took him under his wing. And even I said the only thing I read was The Boys of Summer, which is about that team. But I did read about Jackie Robinson, and the things he went through was just amazing. And I met him once. He was a speaker at Uncle Al's grammar school graduation.
Oh, wow.
And I ran up to talk to him when he was leaving. And Aunt Jenny, who was even more of a Rabbi Dodger fan, was right behind me. And when I put my hand out to shake his hand, and it was like, oh yes, this is really Jackie Robinson. And I sort of like went dumb. I didn't know what to say.
Wow, that's pretty
Okay,
cool.
hon.
All right. Well, have a good night and thank you again.
Thank you, sweetheart. I
Thanks.
have you all to myself.
Mhm.
Anytime we're together, no matter where we went, whether it was lunch or something, somebody always wanted to sit next to Chris, be with Chris. I like that.
Oh,
I got you myself now. I got the baby. I'm in heaven.
oh,
I'll
me
see what I
too.
can think up, and maybe we'll have more pictures
Terrific.
to show. Okay,
Okay,
I love you. Give Megan a big hug and kiss for me.
I will. Love you.
Okay, don't. Good night, honey.
Good night.